Look, I think we both agree people shouldn't have to go to jail for smoking weed. Cheaters don't like getting caught. And being held accountable.
You're aware of the quote, cheaters never prosper. That is evidently unless you're Donald Trump. Kamala Harris, though, will not have it. She confronted him directly about Kimmel, stating that cheaters don't like getting caught and being held accountable. After being found guilty on 34 criminal counts, it appears that Trump is finally going to have to face the music. After 6 weeks of consideration, a unanimous decision, it was no mere trifling jury. Zingers hit Twitter faster than Trump's fingers when Kamala Harris and Jimmy Kimmel sat down. Kimmel and the audience were in laughter as Harris let loose with a flurry of one-liners. Among her most memorable jabs, pointing out how ironic it is that despite Trump's political fame, they have never met. Kimmel was compelled to point out how ridiculous everything was. Harris, on the other hand, was currently in the midst of warming up. A remark that she made was directed at the guilty verdict that was handed down against Trump. She stated that cheaters don't like getting caught and being held accountable. I am in pain. It would appear that in order to treat that burn, Trump is going to need to use some aloe vera. The vice president also made a few strong observations, such as when she pointed out that President Trump has a penchant for tyrants and that he plans to use the Department of Justice as a weapon against his rivals. She also made a few other critical remarks. During the course of the conversation, Harris and Kimmel had a field day with Trump's inclination to claim that other people are guilty of the same things that he is guilty of, as well as his tendency to engage in hypocritical behavior.
He has made it pretty plain that he's planning to go after his enemies, or whatever you want to call them, should he be reelected.
I know more about renewables than any human being on Earth.
Nobody knows more about polls than me.
I know more about courts than any human being on Earth. I understand healthcare now, especially very well.
Say a talk show host that has been making fun of him for what can he actually do to, like, for example, me?
The experience was very similar to seeing a comedy roast, except it was accompanied by a great deal more political information. At the same moment as Harris's wit was on full display, Kimmel was the perfect sidekick. He not only gave her opportunities for punchlines, but he also added his own humorous touch to the situation. As the concert came to an end, it became abundantly clear that Harris and Kimmel had attained their highest level of performance. It was as if they were a well-oiled machine, as they were able to readily produce jokes that were written at Trump's expense. This merely serves to demonstrate that there are occasions when the most effective method for putting an end to a bully is to give a few zingers at the appropriate time. The vice president expressed his disapproval of President Trump's role in persuading the Supreme Court to overturn the Roe v. Wade decision in a manner that was straightforward and honest. Specifically, she was critical of the past president for his habit of picking justices by hand with the purpose of reducing protections for reproductive rights. Her criticism was directed toward the prior president. In point of fact, they did an outstanding job of delivering on Trump's twisted vision. Furthermore, Harris centered his attention on the repercussions that the decision of the court would have in the concrete world. She presented a grim image of medical personnel, such as doctors and nurses, being exposed to criminal charges, as well as the absence of exclusions for rape or incest in certain jurisdictions. She also mentioned that there are no exclusions for sexual assault or incest. I want to warn you all that you are currently traveling into a moral and ethical minefield. Nevertheless, the roasting process did not wrap up at that point. The startling number of 34 felony offenses that have been lodged against Trump was one of the major points of criticism that Harris leveled at Trump about his legal issues. In addition, Kimmel joined in on the fun by making a joke about the consequences that could arise as a result of a hypothetical re-election of Trump. At the same time, he expressed concern about the potential ramifications that an angry Trump could have for a talk show host who had been mercilessly attacking him. He did so in a joking manner.
Are you aware that there is a strain of cannabis named after you, Kamala Kush?
As you know, I've come here from New York, where I'm being forced to endure a Biden show trial, all done by Biden.
You seem to side with our former president, sided with Russia over his own intelligence people. So why do you think that is?
She played along with that admiration at the same time as Harris acknowledged Trump's well-documented affection for tyrants and his threats to weaponize the judicial system against his adversaries. It is important to note that Harris acknowledged both of these things. Additionally, the two persons talked about the evident hypocrisy that Trump brings to the table. The fact that Harris has a propensity to take blame for the same wrongdoings that he has committed himself was brought to the attention of the audience. This tactic is a classic example of Trump's political strategy, which consists of diverting, denying, and pointing the finger elsewhere. Throughout the whole of the episode, Harris and Kimmel provided a 1-2 punch of humor and reality that hit close to heart. They did this constantly. The conversation was filled with a good amount of fun, despite the fact that they did not shy away from the significant matters that were at stake. The conversation was both entertaining and informative. Political satire was a category all by itself when it comes to the subject matter. While Kamala Harris was roasting Donald Trump, Jimmy Kimmel, who is famed for his great timing in comedy, was not going to allow her have all the fun. Kimmel was going to make sure that she had a chance to have some fun. Not only did he bring his A-game to the interview, but he also peppered the subject with his own catchphrases and zingers throughout the duration of the conversation. When introducing Harris, the comedian Jimmy Kimmel made a mocking allusion to her by stating that she was the third most powerful American in the world after Joe Biden and Taylor Swift. However, Kimmel's statement was not intended to be taken as a compliment. Let's be honest, what are you trying to convey when you put Harris in the same category as T-Swift? This is comedy in its purest form. Nevertheless, Kimmel had not yet completed his work. A remark that he made that went something like this was made in order to get in a few digs about the farmers markets in California. He said something along the lines of, "They don't have farmers markets in DC." Harris, without missing a beat, went along with the statement by making a witty remark about the pride that California takes in its produce, particularly those lovely avocados. As they embarked on their journey together, the dynamic couple was only getting started. During the time that Kimmel was preparing the audience for a more serious topic that would be blended with his signature humor,
You couldn't find, there's nobody like that. The look, the brain, the whole thing. We had a great relationship.
And have you ever met Donald Trump?
No.
You've not? Wow, that's something else.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing.
the audience excitedly ate it up and laughed through it with him. In addition, when the decision of the Supreme Court about Roe v. Wade was brought up, Kimmel answered with a question that was completely incomprehensible. Is this something you ever imagined would happen in your lifetime? This was the perfect example of how Kimmel's signature wit could be combined with the gravity of the situation. The real turning moment, though, came when Kimmel speculated that Republicans might be second-guessing their healthcare stance. Throughout the entire interview, Kimmel had the audience giggling. He posed what seemed to be an entirely random question to Harris as they prepared to enter a break. But there were moments when it wasn't just jokes and jabs. Kimmel and Harris talked about a number of important topics, including the absurdity of making marijuana usage a crime and the legal issues that Trump is currently facing. Furthermore, it should not be disregarded that Kimmel mentioned the cannabis kind referred to as Kamala Kush. Harris's reaction was insightful and brought some humor and lightheartedness to an otherwise extremely serious topic. As the conversation came to an end, Kimmel managed to slip in one more jab about Trump's influence on the Republicans. He would rather run on a problem than focus on finding a solution, Kimmel said with a knowing smirk on his face. This was the perfect way to wrap up the show after a segment that was full of wit, humor, and scathing remarks. The crowd was enthralled with Kamala Harris's skillful blending of sober political analysis and a dash of sardonic spice, demonstrating her true mastery of the creative balance. However, she faced the devastating Roe v. Wade ruling from the Supreme Court and did not shy away from the difficult issues. She denounced Trump's plan to load the U.S. Supreme Court, pointing out that he handpicked 3 members with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade.
The most stylish president and first lady in our lifetimes are Donald Trump and Melania Trump.
Have you ever been bitten by the president's dog?
No.
No? Okay.
I know a lot about wind. I know a lot about wind. You know, I know windmills very much. I've studied it better than anybody.
I understand the power of Facebook, maybe better than almost anybody.
She delivered this with a nice balance of seriousness and comedy. However, Harris wasn't satisfied to just offer the facts. She threw in a dash of biting irony as well. She joked about states threatening prison for life for a doctor administering care when discussing the strict regulations that followed Roe v. Wade. It was a comical bow around a serious statement that made it clear that the situation could be viewed as absurd, not to mention the touch of personalization she provided. Harris's critique gained some realism when she drew attention to the fact that there are are no legal exceptions for rape and incest survivors, based on her own experience as a prosecutor. What about her closest friend's sexual assaults at the hands of her stepfather? I related to this since it highlights how immoral it is to refuse exceptions. But wait, there's still more. Harris was worried about more than just the legalization of abortion. Taking aim at Trump's criticism of healthcare, she made sure to highlight his 60 attempts to undo the Affordable Care Act. It was a masterful segue that drew together themes that seemed to be very distinct from one another, using the unifying thread of Trump's wrongdoing. Even when Harris was asked if she had met Trump, she couldn't resist answering with a mocking jab. What was her response? No, you've not. That's something else. It started off as a funny moment before turning into a more somber critique of Trump's actions and their consequences. Not to mention the hilarious thing about Trump's legal troubles, which we can't ignore. Claiming that cheaters don't like getting caught and being held accountable, Harris managed to make a pointed allusion to the 34 felonies he had committed without detracting from the conversation.
Are thinking about that, about the fact that they very well might not be able to get birth control in the states they live in.
Here's case death.
Oh, you're doing death as a proportion of cases. I'm talking about death as a proportion of population. That's where the US is really bad.
Telling them what to do with their own body. And remember, when Donald Trump was president, he supported a national ban and said he would sign it.
Despite all the chaos around him, Harris never lost sight of the greater picture. She emphasized to the audience the value of voting and democracy and stated, "We still have an intact democracy with 3 co-equal branches of government." It was a funny bundle that also served as a call to action. Harris remained composed when the conversation shifted to conjecture over the potential for Trump to retake the presidency. She specifically said he admires dictators and says he'll be a dictator on day 1.
I only want to be a dictator for one day.
I'd rather have Donald Trump as a dictator for 4 years. Absolutely. This country needs a dictator. I hate to say that, but it's the truth.
To highlight his authoritarian tendencies. Nonetheless, the measures taken by her government to uphold democratic standards served as a counterweight to the disquieting idea that was being discussed. The exchange between Jimmy Kimmel and Kamala Harris was a masterful fusion of lightheartedness and pointed political commentary. The talk's tone was deliberately chosen to appeal to the intended audience, which was made up of liberals with strong political beliefs. It was like witnessing the preparation of a delicious political cocktail in before of your eyes, complete with the ideal balance of humor, sarcasm, and depth to keep viewers engaged. Kimmel's comedic asides were the perfect finishing touch, adding a little fun to the otherwise somber subjects being covered. But let's be honest, ladies and gentlemen, this was more than just a fun, humorous act. When it came to exposing Trump's transgressions and the consequences of his actions in the real world, the senator did not hold back. She dropped some stunning truth bombs, such as her criticism of Trump's admiration for autocrats and his plan to turn the Department of Justice into a weapon. Even if you were amused by Kimmel's small-time gags, you were forced to sit up and pay attention to what was happening at that precise moment. This discussion was engaging because it never felt like a preachy political discussion. This is where this discourse's genius lies. There was an almost intimate chemistry between Harris and Kimmel that made it feel like you were listening in on a chat between 2 sharp and witty friends. They skillfully combined political analysis with their own life experiences to create a tapestry of knowledge and entertainment that catered to the tastes of their audience.
The greatest jobs president that God ever created. Free trade can be wonderful if you have smart people.
Well, I could go anywhere from saying farmers markets.
They don't have farmers markets in D.C.
In order to make America great and glorious again, I am tonight announcing my candidacy for President of the United States.
Undoubtedly, there were many fun moments along the way, like the time Kimmel cracked a joke with Trump and Harris's security clearance being found guilty. Still, it's undeniable that this was more than just a lighthearted comedy. Every joke also contained a deeper meaning about how our democracy is now doing and how important it is to keep politicians responsible for their deeds. Kamala Harris skillfully blended comedy and pointed criticism throughout the interview, highlighting the peculiarities of Donald Trump's behavior and statements. Her scathing remarks about the former president's legal problems and polarizing strategies served as a timely reminder of the influence comedy can have on political discourse. Harris was able to effectively communicate important ideas about women's rights, healthcare, and the rule of law to the audience by using comedy as a method of participation. Kimmel's witty comments added a lighthearted touch to the discussion, creating a dynamic that kept viewers engaged while providing insightful information. It was Kimmel who suggested the topic of discussion. As the show was coming to an end, it was clear that comedy could be a very effective tool in politics since it could disarm opponents and highlight the ridiculousness of their positions. According to the exchange between Harris and Kimmel, there are occasions when making people laugh is the best way to get your point across.